All right. Well, Happy New Year, everyone. Welcome to our first open air or air open forum session of the year. We are glad today to have Robin Rosenthal, who is a friend, collaborator, and board member here at Art in Residence hosting. I think most of you in here probably knows Robin, but she engages in sort of creative placekeeping and creative placemaking, as well as a documentary filmmaker. And I'll let her introduce our guest for today in our session. Just a few housekeeping things. Today we are scheduled to go from about 5 to 7. I know Robin and Stevie have a little bit of a presentation and some back and forth between them. We are hoping to leave some time at the end for question and answer. So please hold all questions to the end. If you would, please go ahead and mute your microphones just so that we can make sure that we hear them well. And as the host, if any of you do have microphones and dogs barking in the background, I will certainly take the liberty to mute you myself. So with that, I'll turn it over to Robin. Robin, please, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Hopefully, I can't see myself because I have. What? Yeah, we thought it was 5 to 6, so we'll have plenty of time for Q&A.
Today's session is scheduled to go from 5 to 6, and so we'll have time at the end for Q&A.
Okay.
We'll go as long as you need and as long as we have questions. And as long as you have
maybe we'll go a few minutes over with Q&A. So, okay, well, Dave gave me a pretty good introduction, so I don't think I need to say any more about myself. I want to talk a little bit about Stevie. We both live here in Juniper Hills, which many of you locals know what that is. It's a high desert community, kind of a transitional zone between the mountains and the desert Antelope Valley floor. Stevie lives in an adobe house that she and her husband, Bruce Love, built with adobe bricks that they made by hand from they created every single one in a mold, and you will be hearing about that later. And it's from the very dirt of the hillside that the house sits nestled in. So that's a really, really special thing. She does paint sculpture hybrids, and the paint on these are very physical, which you will see. She's inspired by quite a bit by energy, joy, nature, a lot of reading that she does about energy and many other things. She's excited by visual culture, and she is extremely open to experimentation and seeing what happens as she works. Her work has been featured in private and public spaces across the US, as well as in Asia and Europe. And she is in the permanent collections of the Museum of Art and History in Lancaster and the Riverside Art Museum in Riverside. Stevie, just say hi for a minute and then I'll do my little introduction to the topic.
Okay, hi everybody, welcome. Happy to see, yes, Can you not hear me? Can you hear me? You.
Okay.
Yes. Welcome, I'm so happy to see so many faces, reconnecting with people that I haven't seen in such a long time. So it's great to have you here. Thank you for making the effort to come and enjoy our presentation and just relax and enjoy. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm gonna give just a brief introduction to why we chose this topic in the first place, which I called landscape, loss, and transformation. The place where we live is really special, and we take a lot of nourishment from it on a daily basis. We live probably a mile or two from each other. We're connected as friends. I know we each walk our dogs every morning here, and we're surrounded by beauty. This is a place, it's a juniper pinyon chaparral. We see yucca, we see juniper juniper, we see scrub oaks, bunch
Joshua?
grass, a lot of sage. We have snow, some snow in the winter. We have, if we're lucky, wildflowers in the summer. We can see down to the Antelope Valley floor and out across to Edwards Air Force Base and even to the very tip of the Southern Sierras. So it's very special to us, and it informs a lot of our thinking and a lot of the kinds of work that we do. And as I said earlier, we both feel like we get a lot of nourishment from it. As most of you probably know, our neighborhood up here burnt in the Bobcat Fire in September. And we lost a lot of homes and a lot of landscape, and it became a kind of a ashen black and white moonscape, so to speak. And that's where the loss and transformation comes in. And that's something that we will talk about later. The other reason that I wanted to introduce Stevie's work in one of these open forums is because the Art in Residence group is part of an Artists and Communities project funded by the California Arts Council. And they're introducing to a curriculum to a group of high school students at Quartz Hill High School who will be looking at landscape in 3 or 4 of their different classes from a number of vantage points, you know, looking at history, looking at very early history, looking at geology, looking to write about landscape, to explore making sculptural projects in the landscape, or at least maquettes of sculptural projects in the landscape. There's a plein air component. And I think that, and this will be made available to them to listen to. I think that when you see Stevie's work, you know, you'll think, well, it's not necessarily readily apparent what this has to do with landscape. Some of it is and some of it isn't. And the work that Stevie and I selected is really just a portion of what she does. But there's a definite through line here that connects to this landscape. And I think it'll be really interesting for those students to get an understanding of looking at a landscape from an artist's perspective does not necessarily mean that you are drawing or painting it as it looks to your naked eye. But you know, there are a lot of other ways to be thinking about landscape artistically. And so, you know, although we all know this from art history, I think it'll be nice for them to see a local artist who is doing that with our particular landscape here in the Antelope Valley. So that's a little background on the topic. And I think maybe it's time, Stevie, for you to start up your PowerPoint. And we'll look at the first couple of pieces. Yeah.
Share my screen, and then I'll go to the PowerPoint. Open it. And let's see, how do I open it? This one. Okay, there we go. Oh, so we're not on the first image. Let me back up. Start at the beginning here. Here we go. So now, can you hear me if I talk over these images? Can you hear me?
I hear you very well. Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so
okay.
Here, I wanted to start with some early work, which is just based in energy fields and energy patterns, to give you an idea of where my landscape work came from. So it started with these small, some are not, so this one's small, and I'm using really thick, as you can see, it's very sculptural, acrylic paint squeezed out of squeeze bottles and pastry tubes. So these are purely energy fields that I was painting. This is before we moved up here. Like this one is large, this one's 60 inches on a side. And I have an image here of my tools, the squeeze bottles and the pastry bags that I use. So I don't use brushes at all. It's all really thick, juicy paint, which I am totally addicted to. So here is the first this is the first landscape. This is after we moved up here and after we had built our adobe house. So this image, it's a landscape. It's a little abstract. If you squint at it, you might get it a little easier. The dark places are the bushes and the light dots are the space around them. So it's thinking of the landscape in a kind of an opposite way that you normally think of it. So instead of the bushes being in front of the hill, the bush is a hole, you know, in the landscape. So it has this real, you know, it has its own energy about it.
Stevie, could you talk a little bit? Could you talk a little bit about the kinds of reading and thinking that you have done about energy? I know it's something that you've looked into over a long time.
Yes, I actually started, I've done energy healing myself, started about 10 years ago. I did a number of workshops of in different modalities. And I've used energy healing on people and on myself. And the fact that all humans have this energy available to them is like hugely important to me. You know, if you rub your hands together, you are creating physically a magnetic field, and you can use that energy and place it on, say your knee is hurting, you can place it on your knee and start to heal that knee by your own energy. I know it probably sounds a little woo-woo, but the thing is, it's the truth. Energy is available to all of us. And I'm, you know, and I love reading about metaphysical works and physicists who are also talking about quantum fields and the energy fields that are all around us. For instance, there's this thing called the 0-point field. It's a mathematical concept, which is absolutely fascinating. Probably a lot of you have heard of this before, but that's what creates the times when, you know, some people will know the moment their grandmother dies and she's living, you know, halfway across the country. That's because in the 0-point field, time and space do not even exist. Time and space are concepts that humans have made up. And that's the reality that we live in. The reality that we live in is only the surface. And what's underneath, what you don't see all the time, are these fields of energy where everything is connected. So I'm pushing buttons here, not meaning to. Let me see. So does that answer your question, Robin?
Yes, yeah. And when we get to certain paintings, there's a few things that come to mind from what you just said, but I'll save it for particular paintings.
So here's one that's painted on vellum, which is this really beautiful kind of a plastic surface that's translucent. And then here's one. Now, you know, this is a landscape, but you may have to squint at it to get it. I mean, to me, it's obvious, but there are bushes in the front. There's like a space moving back and then hills in the background. Let's see. And what I did with this one was I took that painting, took a photograph of it, put it in my computer, and made this, what do I want to call it? Like a Rorschach. You know, it's each side replicates the other side. So it's a landscape that's not real, right? So it represents landscape, but it represents some sort of magical energy of the landscape, which we are not usually consciously aware of. So what I did is printed it on silk, and then I took it to Koreatown to get the ancient traditional Korean framing to make this wall hanging. So I did, I think 6 like this, but I just am showing you one. Let me see here.
Stevie, was there a particular reason that you were interested in this Korean wall hanging style?
What happened was I have made wall hangings before and framed things with fabric and hung them, with using molding for sticks and so on. And so I had done a lot of this myself, and then they were, I mean, I liked them fine, but I thought, with the Korean traditional framing, they do such a beautiful job and everything is tight and beautifully made. And so that's why I took it to them, just because they're specialists, at that technique.
You know what interests me? I mean, I know I want to talk about this a little more with certain other paintings, but the mirror image interests me because I see and I see it much more clearly in some later paintings, but I see these dots and this concept of energy as being kind of having a duality of being inside, like diving into the landscape to represent not the skin of the landscape, but the particles from which the landscape, is formed in the most micro level, and then the outside, which I think we'll see even more, is the particles of light and the shimmer that you create, which I'll bring up again when we get to those paintings. But it's kind of like a inside outside simultaneously, like going through the skin of the landscape and then also being outside of the landscape and representing almost like the light of the air, in the landscape situation. So to me, this is sort of the beginning of that idea.
Perfect description, Robin. I'm so used to making these myself that I don't think I have the verbiage for it, but you do. And it's very helpful for me to hear you express what you're seeing there, because that is my purpose. But when I'm making work, I don't start with a concept. I start with the physical paint, how it looks and the juiciness and the physicality of the paint. And you see how the shape of this is completely freeform along the edges. So I'm making the paint, putting down these dots in a very intuitive manner, building from the center and moving outward, and letting the painting take the form of the paint, which is important to me for some reason. The form of the paint is, I don't know, it's a lot of why I do it is because I want to experiment with the paint and see what it'll do. Let's see here. Shall I go on to this one?
Yes.
After doing a few of those landscapes, I came back to making purely energy fields for a while. And what I did was, because I wanted them to hang freeform on the wall, they're not on a rectangle or square of anything. And I want to show you this one, and I have a detail here so you can see. So I use flexible matrices to put the paint on. This is window screen. I go to Home Depot and I'm up and down the aisles looking for, I'm very practical that way, looking for materials that I can use to make a certain result. So this one's on window screen. Sometimes I use bird netting, which is a much looser weave. So that's what that is. And then, whoops.
And is this around the first time when you started separating paintings from a rectangular surface and considering them as objects in themselves?
Actually, no. When I was getting my MFA degree at Claremont, I started using paint free form in this way.
Mm.
Not using dots. Actually, I was using really thick paint, pushing it around with my hands, but that they were free form also. But they were just purely paint. And oh no, they were, you can't really use only paint because the paint is not strong enough to hold it together. The weight of the paint would break the piece. So you have to put it on something to hold it together. This one I think is also on window screen, but whoops. This is when I, one of the first ones that I started putting faux fur on the back, which you can barely see in this picture, but it makes an aura. It's just an extension of thinking about energy fields and how the energy is bleeding out from a piece. Here's one that you can see the faux fur a little easier. This one is on window screen. So I made a few of these and, you know, had a couple of solo shows with this work. And
So stop on this one for a minute, okay?
Yeah. Okay, so this one we're getting back into the landscape again, but as you can see, it's very free form. It's not on any kind of a rectangle. And it has this symmetry, magical, I call it a magical symmetry, because to me, the landscape it's magic. You know, I mean, I always say, actually, I'm out there walking on the hills and thinking, I would not be the same person if I did not live on this hill. You know, I spend time outdoors on the hillside every single day, and it's a part of who I am. It's in me. And I feel the energy is in me and my energy is in there. I mean, we're just like this symbiotic thing happening. So this could be actually a symbol of that symbiosis going on.
Can you flip back one, go backwards one?
Yeah. To this one or further?
The blue one, backwards.
Yeah.
Oh no, the pink one, that's fine, yeah. Yeah, you know, there's a little delay. So when you flip them, it takes a minute for it to get here. Either one of these, that's okay. I think these are the ones that for me, you know, most people in this talk know their art history, you know, and they know Impressionism and then they know Pointillism as a development coming out of Impressionist painting, but even more sort of scientific about optics and how color works. And these, for me, really exemplify that idea of inside and outside that I was talking about earlier, because for me, they're like the color combinations they create a sort of a shimmer of light, especially in person, that's in front of the painting, that is like the very light that you would experience on a beautiful day in the landscape, and yet I know that you're also thinking about energy beneath the surface. So these, for me, have a lot to say about that duality. They really sort of dive in, and yet they're very much like they create something in front of the painting as well. So I just wanted to remark on that, because I really like what happens with this particular batch. I'm not calling them a batch, but they're not cookies, but you know what I mean.
You're right. Something's happening in front of these paintings.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
very, like, now that is something I put a lot of thought into, because my little trick is I use a lot of complementary colors. So if I have an orange dot, I start looking for a pink paint to put on top of it. And that's what makes them jump and sing the way this one does. The way it moves in and out of space, it's because of the color choices. And the color choices are very, like I say, I work intuitively, but the color choices are thought out, as I go. Like, it's not planned ahead, but I'll just start putting down shades of color and then start building on top and building on top of that and building on top of that. But I'm always looking for the opposites, you know, orange on top of turquoise is nice. Things like that. And that's what makes them do what they do, like you say, about having the inside and outside right there in front of you.
And I think a lot of people would not, many people would not look at this and necessarily have landscape as their first thought. But I think that there is a definite landscape influence here. And, you know, light is part of our landscape.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. So
So,
now, yeah. Mm. So this one is pretty big. This one's 4 feet across. You can't tell by looking. I think I have a detail shot, although I apologize. It's not in focus, this detail shot. But this one is quite large. It's 4 feet across. And this one was at the Ontario airport for about 6 months last year, which was exciting. And now we're getting into, now I have a whole series of landscapes made with dots and with faux fur surrounding them. So I call this one Magic Mountain. And it's, I guess I should tell you the size. This is probably 36 inches across. It's not too big. Let me see here.
and you're thinking specifically of landscape at this point when you
Yes, I
paint
am.
these? Yeah.
Right. These are
Yeah,
specific.
see, for like this particular, this one here, I remember seeing this series and I felt, this is probably a couple years ago, 2 years maybe.
Yeah, that's
I felt that landscape in this work was becoming much more discernible again. And I wondered why, what were you thinking about? Or just playing, or was there something that took you in that direction?
I think for me, it's really pretty simple. It's like one thing leads to the next. You know, like I made this one and I love the hills up here and I wanted it to be, I wanted it to be free form. So it's got these flat edges at the bottom, which gives it a base that makes it feel like more like a landscape. It's not like the freeform ones that I showed earlier that are completely uneven all the way around. So this feels like it has this, like it's sitting, you know, so a definite landscape feel on this one. And then, so that was the hills like looking up. I'm looking up at our hills behind our house all the time. And this is looking out at the desert through the hills. And you can see the desert way off in the distance there. And when I was making this one, I don't have a picture of that one, but I was making some pieces that were based on quilts and how quilters pattern, you know, cut pieces of fabric and pattern them together. And I was real excited by these quilts I was looking at. So these hills are made of, they're kind of made of quilted together pieces of color and paint. And then the three-dimensionality.
Were you looking at the G-band African quilts? Is that what it was, or other quilts?
I was looking at those. I love, they were African, but they weren't actually G-band, but they were African quilts that I was looking at. They're very inspiring, very inspiring. You know, the way they put things together is so illogical. They're illogically imagined, and then they're just stunningly beautiful.
Well, there's a little bit of a parallel with your working process because they have a quality of, some quilts have a quality of happenstance to them. You know, it's like,
Right.
what fabric do you have? How much of it do you have? What shape did you happen to start with? And,
Mhm.
you know, what's
And
left from this piece of cloth.
a lot of them are extremely abstract, like there's no pattern discernible, you know, and they're just stunning. Oh, and one thing about this one too is I'm starting to leave spaces between the paint and lines so that the red fur is peeking out. So I don't know, I'm always I'm always experimenting and always noticing things that are happening that I'm not doing on purpose. And I'll see something, I'll go, oh, that's good. Let's just leave it like that. You know, let's not fill that with paint right there. Let's leave those holes for the red fur to show through. So the way I work is like, it's so intuitive and experimental. I don't start with a concept or an idea. I start with the paint and I start putting paint down because I just love the look of it. You know, I'm just entranced by putting down these juicy colors and they just look good to me. And then, you know, I make a lot of decisions to make, to make things, wait a minute. To make things, I'm looking for in this one, I'm looking for 3-dimensionality. And I'm looking to call attention to the fact that this is not a real landscape, okay? These lines coming from the back here and coming towards the front, all of a sudden they turn and they drip down. Now, why are they doing that? I don't know. It just looks good. Well, what it does is it makes it, it gives it its own personality. So it's not like a landscape you've ever seen before because something's going on with the paint as a paint object itself. And that gets into very kind of abstract territory, which I don't even think I can talk about, but I love doing it. And I love making the paint make its own sort of statement, you know, apart from the subject matter. The paint is as important or maybe more important than the subject matter.
Mm-hmm.
It has its own life. It's coming out and it's turning and it's dripping down. You know, it's like coming out of the landscape
Yeah,
and
no,
turning into.
it's fascinating because it starts with landscape, but you don't let it stay as landscape, you know, and the paint definitely has its physical characteristics on, you know, full display here
Yeah.
with the drips.
Okay. Let's see. Now, what's this one? This one's even more abstract. I call this one Canyon because to me, it feels like being in a canyon. Okay. It does not look like any drawing of a canyon I've ever seen. I did not make a drawing of a canyon when I started it. I started with some of these earthy colors and I put that blue up there because I was thinking sky, but I didn't have a concept to begin. And when it was done, I named it Canyon because that's what it looks like to me. It's like walking inside a dark canyon with the daylight coming through a space at the top, you know, inside the canyon.
Yeah. So shadow in the canyon.
Yes, exactly. Okay. And here's like the orange and the green, you know, complementary colors. In the sky is a light blue with a light orange. So it starts to shimmer, and that's why it shimmers, because they're complementary colors. That's what they do. So here's a little one. This might be the first one where I decided, well, I don't know, I have all this fur as aura coming from the back. How about putting some fur as part of the composition on the front? And I just really liked the way that worked. So I started doing this. Plus, I started putting sequins. I had some sequins hanging around the studio for another purpose. And I have, you know, sort of supplies of this and that, sequins and gems and jewels. And So I'm using the sequence in a way to call attention to the different spatial parts of this landscape, you know, parts that are maybe catching the sunlight, something like that. And
There's a whole other thing that it happens for me and that I'm reminded of beginning with this one and that carries over into the next few is that the landscape that we look out on, and I think so many landscapes that many of us know were once inland sea. And so something about the sequins and the sparkle and these shapes that remind me of sea urchins, it's kind of, for me, it's just like this crazy fantasy world of like part current day landscape and part how it, like where it came out of. Because I know that when we look down at the desert floor, that was once a sea.
that was,
And I know that in many of the landscapes we look at. So as soon as I start to see those sparkles, I think of water and I think of sea urchins and I put them all together and it's kind of a crazy mix for me in a good way.
yeah, there you go. And we have more coming up that are even more like that. So, but this one, I just want to mention here, you can see the matrix of this one because it's bird netting and you can see how wide apart the grid is that this is lying on. And also there's also space in between the paint lines to let the fur show through from the back. Let's go on. Oh, this is a detail of that. I have to apologize for this one's not in focus either. Whoops. And here's one landscape where those, I think they're bush shapes encroaching from the sides onto this flat area that's moving away from us, you know, three-dimensionally moving back. And then the bush shapes are encroaching from the sides. Whoops. Oh, wait, we're not ready for that. Oh, I don't know why it's jumping around. Let me see. I don't touch anything, maybe.
What's after,
So
what's after this one?
Yeah. Oh, after this one is,
Oh,
this is the one that really looks like ocean.
to me.
Hills.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know
And
we're
what's
not supposed to go around interpreting paintings like this looks like this and that looks like that, but
right. No, as soon as I put
because-
the sequence down there, I put the sequence down there because I just love the color. And as soon as I put it there, I thought, well, that doesn't exactly remind me of the desert. It reminds me of, you know, water.
yeah,
And like you say, like things growing underwater is what it looks like. Which, but you know, I love that that reference there because, like you say, we were all underwater at one time. All of the earth was underwater and it's been moving around for millions of years, up and down, in and out. So I think it's fine that it looks like
I think
underwater.
it's more apparent in some landscapes than others. Like when you look out on the desert and you look at all that creosote, you know, it's kind of like this, you know, you can imagine it. Whereas, you know, the trees up here are more solid and sturdy.
Right.
Yeah. I think we should, since we want to get into the house also and the fire, we should look at the next few of these before we get to talking about the fire.
I don't even know if there's any left. Let me see. Oh, okay. This is the last one.
The one,
okay.
the see-through, yeah, the see-through with the orange stripes, I think.
Yeah. I guess you haven't seen it yet. I think I just. Okay, so this one is, to me, is definitely hill forms, but they're gathered together in such a way that the sky is a hole in the middle. So it's really, you know, an abstracted idea of landscape with the space, you know, that you can dive into that space in the center. In fact, this one's called Deep Dive. I mean, right now, this is one
It's
of my
really
favorites.
effective.
I love things that get really abstracted and really just like the shapes are just powerful, you know, simple, powerful shapes with a big mystery, you know, like that. There's a big mystery in the center there. So this is the last one I'm going
Okay.
to show.
All right. So then came the fire.
Oh,
September
right.
18th, right?
Yeah. Right.
And for those, you know, I think most people on here appear to be local, but a few are not. And it came down from the mountains, the same mountains that are behind Stevie's house and across the street from me, basically. And it hopscotched through Juniper Hills, and it did a lot of devastation. Many people lost everything. A lot of landscape was basically incinerated. And this is very personal and emotional, I know. Could you talk a little bit about what you discovered when you got to see your own house?
Well, when we came up, the house was fine, which was fabulous. The firefighters did an amazing job with the houses. They saved, you know, 80% of the houses here by doing really wide bulldozer track, like 40-foot wide bulldozer tracks, and dumping water and dumping fire retardant. And, you know, our house was untouched, but everything within, I guess, 20 feet of the house was burned up black. And I had a 20-foot storage container out there, huge thing, full of 20 years of artwork. Well, the floor of that metal container is wood. So the fire got in from underneath and burned up everything inside, 20 years worth of artwork, which you can imagine floored me, and threw me for a loop and threw me into a space which I'm still have not figured out what it all means to me, because number one, I don't want to be in that position again where I have 20 years worth of artwork stacked up somewhere. You know, I'm in my 70s. I don't want to leave 80 or 100 pieces of work for my family to deal with. So I started thinking of it as a blessing. Like, I don't have to think about that anymore. Okay. The universe took care of that problem for me. But what am I going to do going forward? I still haven't come to terms with it. I'm not sure what to do. I've been an artist all my life. I'm not going to stop making art, but I'm not sure how to approach the next, you know, my next time. So shall I go on to the next thing, Robin, and show them what I did, right? Because what I did was, I came into the studio and I had been making these, I had a few, let me describe them to you. I'm cleaning my palette and I'm putting the paint into a paper cup to throw it away. And I'd been doing this for years. And sometimes I would look in them and go, wow, well, I think that looks pretty cool. I'm not going to throw that away. So I started putting fake fur around them. And right after the fire, or pretty much after the fire, I came into the studio and I started making these, not only with fur, but with gems and jewels. And they gave me so much pleasure and so much joy. I completely forgot all of my worries, you could say, and just loved making all these different cups and dripping thick paint down inside the cup and adding jewels and then putting the fur around. And they look to me like female anatomy, right? There's a hole there and there's fur around. So they're like wombs, you could say. And then decorating with gems and jewels that is like honoring them for being these magical, magical spaces. Now I'm going to try and play. I made a video. Let's see, where is that? Can you hear the music?
I hear the music. I am not seeing the video move as before. Yeah.
Oh. So I'm seeing the video, but we had this problem before. Bruce and I tried this. today and
Yeah.
using it
So I
on
think
Zoom. The Zoom won't show the video, unfortunately.
for me, it looks like a slideshow, not, and I know that you shot it as moving around the piece. So I don't know if, can anybody see it as a video, or does it look like a slideshow to everybody?
Slideshow. Looks
Yeah,
like it's
Slideshow.
I'm getting some
Yeah,
lag here.
okay.
Okay, so what we, oops,
Yeah.
so what
But
I'll
we have
do is
images.
go, so, oh, wait a minute, sorry. So I thought I had an overall picture. Here we go. So this is what it looks like. Ooh. So I ended up with 55 of these cups, and here's a detail. It's what they look like close up. And since they look like females to me, I've named it 55 girlfriends, and each cup is named after one of my girlfriends. So on the back of each cup is the name of a woman that's a friend of mine. And I was shocked because 55, I have personal relationships with 55 women, and I ran out of cups. I need more. I need another 30 or 40 because I have 30 or 40 more girlfriends to make cups for. So, it's a function of having been to grad school and having that big network of artist friends, and a function of social media, right? We're in contact with so many people. I mean, I really do have personal relationships with this many women, which astounded me when I realized it. So this is what they look
Shall
like.
I share my my odd alternate take on this?
Oh yes, do.
So, okay. So it's not really alternate so much as additional. After the fire, it's hard, if you haven't seen it, it's hard to describe the trees that were bushy, whether they were yerba santa, juniper, they just incinerated down to the ground and left piles of ash in a kind of a circular circumference around what's called the snag, the branch or two that is still sticking up. And all of us, I noticed that many of us on social media were saying, look at all the animal holes. I remember that, Stevie, you were looking at animal holes, and I know that I have been, as well as collecting ash and things like that. I remember Marie Unini was talking about the ant holes and all the busy activity happening underground. And when I saw these, I saw your title and I knew that it was related to vaginal and womb-like uterus parts, all of the women parts. But at the same time, I thought, well, we're all wondering, like, what happened to these underground communities? And here's this ashy, purely gray, black and white top, but underneath the ground, there's something going on, And so for me, the jewels and the colors and the idea that these could be homes, little animal homes under there, and that there's a whole life that continued to go on underground, adds to this piece for me, that whole other layer, and I knew you were looking at these things, but you tell me that didn't come into the piece. But,
But as soon as you told me that idea, it totally makes sense to me. Because they are hidden away homes back in there.
Yeah. So it's sort of like the richness of a life underground, which is metaphoric in so many ways. So
Right.
This is really, really a neat piece.
Okay. So should we go on? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say, so you don't really know at this point whether this will change your artistic practice permanently, but this is your first response, correct?
Yes, that's right. I have no idea what's coming next. I really don't. I don't know what to do. So we'll see.
Okay. So let's look at your Adobe house for a few minutes before we go to Q&A. Everybody should know that Bruce and Stevie, you can talk about the process and how long ago you guys built it and all of that.
Okay.
But she is writing a book about the whole process. So we will all be able to learn everything about this. And the thing I would hope that you might talk about for a minute or two is what went into the process of deciding to use Adobe, because Bruce being an archaeologist and being and you being interested in energy, Bruce being very knowledgeable from his research about a variety of various Native American cultures. I feel like the house has a lot of ideas about spirituality and the earth built into it. And I'd like to hear how you would talk about that.
It does for both Bruce and myself. This house is, I got to say, a sacred place. Bruce is a he does California archaeology, and he works a lot with California natives, but also for 40 years he's been traveling in the Maya area, and he's a Maya specialist, and he speaks Mayan, and he translates Mayan hieroglyphs, and he works with Mayan people. And so the form of this house, the straight sides and the rounded ends, is a copy of the way Mayans structure their homes. They have straight sides and rounded ends. And, you know, when we told the architect we wanted to do this, he said, well, I don't know. He said, are you married to that idea? And Bruce goes, yes, we're married. So Bruce had definite ideas about bringing the earth of the hillside into the home. And that's what it is. So we made these adobe bricks using the dirt of the hillside. And I have a picture here of my niece, Hillary, who's on the Zoom. She's looking at it from Minneapolis with her kids and her spouse. So I took this picture, I brought this picture along because you can see the forms that we made, wooden forms. We had 2 forms like that, and we made 14,500 blocks, making 2 at a time. And Hillary came on the first weekend. We first started making blocks with 3 of her girlfriends from Berkeley, and they were all on the crew team. So these are girls with big shoulders, man. These women are strong. And the whole first weekend, we worked, the 4 of them, with Bruce and myself. And then we ended up getting help. They all went back home and whoops. And we ended up hiring some guys from the corner, from 4 Points. And we ended up with the same team, this awesome people, 4 men. And if they couldn't come one weekend, their cousin would come in their place. And we had a team, and we made all the adobe blocks. We were living in Riverside, camping up here on the hillside, and made all the blocks one summer, coming up every weekend. And we've been in the house now 12 years. And there's me on top of the wall. I mean, I could talk forever about the house. There's so much to talk about, the structure, how it was made, and all that. So I don't want to go into all that. It's take too long.
Well, anyway, we want us to buy the book. So, right, when you write the book, we have to have something left to learn. So,
yeah, so the book is in process, and it's supposed to be published this fall. And I will let everyone know when it's out. Right.
I think that just to bring it back to landscape before we open it up to Q&A, I guess what I wonder if you could just say a few words about is, like, to me, one of the best things I realize every day about living here is that, like, we don't have hardscape, and we just walk out onto the dirt, and everywhere we go, it's the dirt, you know, and the dirt is, you know, it's part of us, you know, I mean, and we're part of it,
Right.
and it's part of our mountain. And so how do you feel, like, do you feel energy coming out of the dirt when you're in the house? What do you feel?
I feel when I'm walking, when I walk in the house without fail, every time I come home, I walk in the house, I don't know how to explain it. I feel this super quiet, really calm, really peaceful. Um, it has this sort of enveloping feel, and everyone who comes to visit feels it. It has an enveloping feel to it that you notice. It's like calming. Your heart slows down, I think, and it's just a very magical, sacred place to be. And it is because it's made of this dirt, and it's because it's sitting on this hillside. Um, it feels like it's all one, it's all one thing.
Mhm.
And being on the dirt, like you mentioned, Robin, is so healthy for us as human beings to walk on the earth. You know how, people love going out in nature, and that's a big part of it because you're walking on the earth and you are absorbing earth energy through your feet and up your legs and up and into your body, whether you're conscious of it or not. And it's very health giving. Very
No,
healthy thing to do.
I feel
walk in
that to
nature,
be
which
very,
everyone is aware of that.
but
You feel.
whether we think about it consciously or not, I think we feel the connection, and yeah, it's unique. There's nothing between us and the earth around here.
Right.
Um,
Mhm.
so I'm wondering, thank you, Stevie, that was fantastic.
Thanks.
I see there's 10 things in the chat. I'm wondering if we can open it up to Q&A. I don't know if Nate or Dave, if you want to kind of watch for raised hands or see if there are questions in the chat. However you guys want to do it, maybe you could help out with that.
Sure. Yeah, I can jump in on that. Stevie, Robin, I want to first thank you for a wonderful talk. Very intriguing, and I do have a few questions of my own. As far as questions, we kind of you can turn on your mic when you want to ask a question. Just be respectful of someone if they're asking a question first. And it's a first in, first question, I guess. But I'll go ahead and kick it off. Stevie, it is apparent that you have a very acute sensibility for energy fields and sort of auras around landscape and just nature in general. And I see your paintings as a kind of imaginary, I wrote it down as an imaginary energy scape of land, as opposed to being landscapes, depictions of landscapes, right? Because you kind of start with paint and you allow that paint to sort of feed in, and then it takes on the form of a landscape in the end. And because you work intuitively, it's like you find yourself back into this sort of like nature through paint. And there's a kind of nice full circle where, traditionally pigments are made from, grinding up colored rocks, and then you create paint in that way. Obviously, we don't do that as much now because it's not permanent, but there is a kind of like full circle in terms of the artistic process in terms of creating paintings. And it also shows in your adobe bricks, in the building of your house and the way that you've described how you enter your house. So the question I have, I guess, is, I know you said that you don't really know where you're moving forward, but is there an inclination to continue in the realm of landscapes and thinking about it in correlation to energies and its representation through paint?
Yeah, and I think I'm now going to have to include gems and jewels and sparkles.
There you go.
I really love that. It makes me feel good to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And what the hell? I should feel good, right?
Right.
So, yeah, I have ideas of things I want to do. Like, I shouldn't talk about it too much, but I'm picturing like big paint forms that are landscape based. And somehow I got to get the jewels in there. I'm not sure how, but the jewels are too tiny. I'm going to have to get jewels that are like 5 inches across or something. I'm not sure. Something like that. but I really am entranced by, you know, I just love looking at the hills. I could look at these hills all day long. You know how hills form, the logic of them, how one goes in front of the other, and this part is here and this part's here, and it's like, they're logical. They're so logical that you look at them and it makes you take a deep breath and go, oh, it's like right. It's all right. It's all correct. Somehow because it's nature. Nature is correct. And you know, makes you feel good, basically.
I appreciate that, Stevie. I'm looking forward to seeing what you have lined up. I think I see a raised hand from Karen.
Hi. First of all, I want to say I adore your work. I think that it's really exceptional and very beautiful, and just resonate. It has so much energy. But I'm curious, you're so attached to the earth and energies.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever wanted to work in something more natural than paint or faux fur or jewels and sequins?
Yeah. I think about that a lot because the paint is not a natural, you know, it's not, oil paint is more natural. Acrylic paint comes from, it's made from polymers, which I don't, you know, I think about that a lot, that I'm not being very eco-friendly by using, but then I think about if I didn't do that, you know, I would lose all that immediacy of the color and the form and the shininess, which I'm just addicted to. So I guess I'm not going to give that up.
You know, I have to tell you though, what I love about your work, when you started talking about quilting, it reminded me of, oh God, what's his name? Anatsui, I think it is. It's the African artist who uses all the detritus from his society, and he makes these gorgeous kind of textiles out of it. And your work has a lot of that feeling of that tactile, colorful interweaving of light and texture. So yeah, it's great. I get it.
It's beautiful. I love his work. Gorgeous.
Can I just make a quick suggestion that we go back to the Zoom gallery and drop the Stevie's screen away?
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Let's see.
So then we can see more people and see who might have their hand up.
There we go.
Yeah.
How's that?
Perfect.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
Now,
I
if
have
people raise their hand, we can see them.
yeah, so I have another comment, or someone has another comment from Nancy. So Nancy, if you want to chime in here.
Yeah, I just have a comment about Stevie's work. I burst out laughing when in your very first images, there's this very little bit of the fur showing around the edge. Then all of a sudden the fur like bursts out in the middle, and it like demanding to have its say. And then all of a sudden the work after that, there's way more much fur really on the outside edges. But the very first image you showed, it like pops up blue in the middle, like I gotta have my say. And there's a part of me that admires you so much, Stevie, that you let the medium tell you what to do rather than you coming in with a preconceived idea. I just love that part. It's like, you don't know what's going to happen. It's going to tell you what's going to happen.
Right, that's right. You know, it takes all the pressure off of me. I don't have to make the decision. It's much better, much more enjoyable.
Let's see. Anybody else have a comment or a question they'd like to share? I think I see in Hillary's screen a hand raised.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how Stevie decided that she was gonna be an artist for her job.
Mm.
You know what? I just started making drawings and little paintings with finger paint. Oh my God, I loved finger paint when I was about 5 years old. And I would make these finger paints, and you know, my grandmother put it up on the wall and people loved it. And I think, you know, I liked getting that attention. And I think that's where it started. People loved what I did. And so that made me want to do it more. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Hillary, one day you're going to be presenting at one of our open forums.
That was a good question.
That was a great question.
All right. Anyone else? I think we have time for a couple more questions or comments, if anybody has any.
Me again, I'm sorry. Did you save any images from a lot of the work that you lost? I mean, had you photographed it enough so that it's not lost completely?
Right. Yes, I documented everything. So everything was documented. I have pictures of everything was gone. Yeah.
Thank goodness, that is devastating.
There's that, but you know, it's not the same as looking at them in person is the thing.
No.
It's never the same, right? If you go to a museum and you look at art on the wall and then you look at the catalog, there's just no comparison, right?
But you know that you're in good company, that Monet burned all his work, and you know, there's a lot of people who subscribe to burning their work and cleansing and moving on.
Someone just did mention that to me the other day. I was having an astrology reading, and she said, you know, that your work burned up is kind of a sacred event. I go, okay, I'll take that.
Well, you know, with death makes room for rebirth, right?
There we go.
Yeah. Well, with that, if there aren't any more last comments, I want to thank Robin and Stevie again for doing this presentation. And I want to thank everyone on behalf of Art in Residence for attending. Before we go, Stevie, I wanted you to share your title with everyone for your book so that they can look out for it. That would be coming out.
You know, I don't have a title yet.
Okay.
I don't have a title.
All right.
So,
Well, we're all gonna look out for Adobe Brick House by Stevie Love.
Adobe. I have to have Adobe House in the title so that people will know right off, you know, that it's about that. So
Right, well.
it won't be an obtuse title. It's going to be something.
All right. Well, definitely keep us updated. And again, we thank you for coming on. And from AIR, we all thank you for joining us. And stay tuned for what we have coming up for our next open forum. You guys can check it out at our website, artinresidence.gallery. All right, guys.
I am
Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.